One of the things that we wanted to accomplish was to revise the booking process, which has yet to be done.
And how did you want to revise it?
Well, the issue with the booking process for me is that there's a pre-intake screening done that is extremely cursory. It's done in an environment that really doesn't have a lot of privacy. It's loud, it's boisterous, and the level of staff doing that booking screening is not what we would like it to be so that it would be effective. And really what we wanted to do was, it's important to have that pre-intake screening done to look for significant elements that need to be addressed right now. Things like if somebody's arrested and they used police dogs to arrest them and they have bites that need to be taken care of. Major wounds, they have a fracture, they jumped off of a building or something. So the pre-intake process is really an accept-reject process. It's not the foundation upon which you build a healthcare delivery system. And so a good booking process does that accept-reject screening, and then you do another screening a little bit later in the process where everybody goes through the same process. They have a more complete interaction, and you do the elements that are necessary to get people started in the system. You verify their meds, you verify their past medical history, you take a look at their infectious disease issues, you put a PPD on them, you get them started in their process, get anything that's critical for their health care taken care of. And that element doesn't exist for CHS. I would agree with you. The people who are at the line level within CHS are typical healthcare workers. They want to do a good job. Nobody comes to work wanting to hurt anybody. Nobody comes to work wanting to do a bad job. They really want to take care of their patients, and they want to do a great job. And they are heroes for working in the system, given the challenges and things that exist. And I really respect the line workers within CHS because they want things to work. And I can tell you that the prevailing philosophy here, it tends toward one side of the spectrum, which is kind of that tougher jails, tough on crime. We want people to be uncomfortable and not enjoy their jail stay. And there are many other facilities that are further on the other side of the spectrum, which is, we want this to be a place of correction. We want to help people improve their lives so they don't come back, and it's not nearly as punitive. So I definitely sense that in the jails. But with that said...
The jails here in Maricopa County.
Yes. With that said, I found the sheriff's office guys that I worked with to be professional with me, and I didn't see any issues that, for me were blatantly out of line. But they're not as proactive about the care that occurs. They're not as proactive about looking out for the prisoners. They're not as proactive about kind of making sure that things are going okay within the jails. It's you have to fend for yourself in these jails.
And not as proactive as they should be, or as you experience in other different jails outside of Maricopa County.
Well, I think the issue of as they should be is a judgment call made by somebody, not by me. However, what you see are kind of the end results of that philosophy, in the sense that these jails are much more violent than a lot of other jails that I go visit. It's a little bit more difficult for the prisoners to access care here because you really sort of have to advocate for yourself. The officers don't do a lot of advocacy for the prisoners. And the jail that I work in Salt Lake and these jails here are just, they could not be more dissimilar on every dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
you're talking in terms of safety and health care?
Yeah, I mean the philosophy in Salt Lake is very much a proactive philosophy by the officers. They watch over the prisoners. They make sure that their units are running well. Somebody has a change in their behavior. They're very proactive about calling the health services unit or mental health to get people down there to check on them. That really wasn't the case within these jails in my experience.
One of the reasons you accepted this assignment down here in November 2004 was because you thought that the county wanted you and others to help change that culture in Phoenix, correct?
Well, to be clear, I never got an indication that they wanted us to change the sheriff's culture.
The culture of the jail, I mean, in terms of being...
They wanted us to change the CHS culture and the CHS operations.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would never be so bold as to say that, I'm a professional law enforcement officer and know how to run a jail. However, I've been in a lot of jails, and I certainly know, how they run, and you certainly observe differences in philosophy and operations as you go into different facilities.
Well, one of the things that troubled you, that you became aware of down here, was that the quality of health care was so bad before you took over, and even during some of the time you were here, that CHS workers were telling inmates that were pretty seriously sick that if they want to get care, they better fake an emergency and hit the ground in order to get care quickly. Is that correct?
Foundation.
That's correct. That is a well-known issue within the jails, and in fact, some of the healthcare providers were so concerned about some of their fragile patients that they actually instructed them to do that if they got sick, because that's the way to be seen within a reasonable amount of time. Well, the first that I can recall for this instruction was that we owed the county a report about the state of CHS, which we came in to kind of do an initial assessment of kind of how things were. And what we found were practices that were not legal, and we were instructed, I believe it was in January or early February of '05, to pull those from the report and to brief them only verbally. And more to the point, I realized that my continuing to work in the system put my own license at risk, and it really kind of came to a crisis of conscience about what to do about that. I'm far from the only clinician who's left CHS. There's been quite an exodus of staff who have left for the same reasons. Well, in healthcare, anytime you have critical information, the responsibility that you have is to ensure that that information is passed on to somebody who will take action with it. And so blindly faxing this critical information to a fax machine that you don't even know, is operational, you don't know if there's anybody there to receive it, just doesn't, that's just not up to standards within healthcare.
The guards say, well, we didn't get her any help because she was just coming off of drugs. It was drug withdrawal. Is that an adequate response to witnessing a human being deteriorate that rapidly?
Absolutely not. And it's not an adequate response to attribute that to drug withdrawal. I mean, that's just inappropriate.
Well, because first of all, they don't know, do they?
Exactly.
They're not trained to diagnose.
Exactly. But even if it were drug withdrawal, that is serious drug withdrawal that needs to be treated. I work in kind of a musculoskeletal part of medicine, and so many of the things that I encountered were prostheses that were ordered, braces, certain kinds of burn compression socks and things that people needed to keep, and we would order them, they'd get them, and then they would do the SWAT team sweeps and take everything away, and next visit the prisoner would come down and say, they took my thing away. Mm-hmm. Which, is problematic because they need that, and those devices are expensive, and here we are again spending CHS's budget when we don't need to. I mean, it's unnecessary waste of money.